Hi, everybody.
Vice President, how are you?
Great. Great start to the week here in Iowa. Thank you all for being along for the ride. We're going to be here the better part of the week, and then we'll find our way back this weekend for a major event focused on pro-family issues. But I just continue to be so inspired by the way the people of Iowa take to heart their responsibility to shape our nation's leadership. And at a time when American families are hurting, when our economy is hurting, when we see the failed policies of the Biden administration at home and abroad, I have great confidence the people of Iowa are going to give us the right standard bearer in our party and are going to set a foundation for us, not just to win an election in 24, but to win back a boundless future for the American people. So, how can I help you?
Vice President, I have a question. What's your reaction to Biden being Alaska today instead of at the site of 9/11 Ground Zero?
Well, look, I was very disappointed that President Joe Biden was not at Ground Zero or the Pentagon or in Shanksville today. Look, I know it's been 22 years, but I think these are moments where the leader of this country has the ability to pay a debt of gratitude, to remember those that were lost that day, but also to remember the heroes that were forged that day, and every day since for the last 22 years. You know, all the men and women that have stepped forward and put on the uniform. I would have rather seen the Commander-in-Chief paying tribute to the innocent lives that were lost, and also especially to those soldiers, sailors, airmen, or Marines that paid the last full measure of devotion to defend our country from that ever happening again. So I was privileged to join some firefighters in Ankeny this morning, and I wouldn't have been anywhere else.
Mr. Vice President, you said today that your son was checking into Top Gun, and you've also talked today about those who were inspired to put on the uniform 22 years ago. Can you talk about that? Is he one of those people who's inspired after 9/11 to fight for the country?
Well, I'm incredibly proud of my son and my son-in-law, who's also a fighter pilot. He serves in the United States Navy. But I will tell you that September 11th will always be remembered as a very dark day in the history of our country. But in the midst of that darkness, the light of heroism shone forth, firefighters charging into the towers without regard to their personal safety. Todd Beamer and others on Flight 93 who charged forward in that cockpit, and I believe undoubtedly saved lives in our nation's capital when they brought that plane down. But I must tell you, the next day, when the lines outside recruiting stations went around the block in every major city in this country, I think we saw the character of the American people writ large. I'm very proud of my family members who, long after that day, answered the call to serve our country. But I'm just as proud of all the men and women who, in the wake of that despicable attack on our country that claimed nearly 3,000 lives, looked in their hearts and answered a call to put on the uniform of the United States. And we think of them today too, especially those who put on the uniform and paid the last full measure of devotion. It's one of the reasons why I felt compelled to find a small ceremony here in Iowa today. And I really do believe that we owe a debt of honor and a debt of gratitude to the heroes forged that day, and to all of the heroes who've stepped forward every day since. And I'm obviously proud of our family's service, but I'm proud of the service of every American family that has loved ones in uniform today.
Mr. Vice President, Vivek Ramaswamy recently told reporters that he would want to cut USAID, the agency. Do you think that's an agency that should be eliminated, downsized? Do you think doing so would perhaps put America at risk?
I think USAID has done some extraordinarily important work. If I'm President of the United States, we're always going to look for greater efficiencies in the USAID program. But the humanitarian support of the American people has been a key part of our foreign policy whether it be my years as vice president traveling the world, or whether it was my years on the International Relations Committee in the Congress. I saw the way USAID strengthened the ties between the American people and nations around the world, and I'd be looking for opportunities to continue to strengthen that, even while we look for efficiencies for taxpayers in these times of unprecedented national debt.
Mr. Vice President, House conservatives are pressuring Speaker McCarthy amid a government shutdown looming about Biden impeachment efforts and inquiries. Do you support those, and how would you advise Speaker McCarthy to handle the situation?
Well, I'm very grateful that House Republicans have been using the authority that they have to get to the bottom of the ethical controversies swirling around the president's son and the president's family. Look, the American people have a right to know what was going on. I mean, I must tell you, I simply can't relate, having been vice president, to the idea of having family members involved on the boards of foreign corporations and in countries that I had responsibility to guide policy. So, but I think it's extremely important that Congress continue to do its work. I'm heartened that it appears that the new special prosecutor in Hunter Biden's case is prepared to move forward with some charges. We've got to have confidence in equal treatment under the law, and I think that's an important first step in that direction. But you know, at the end of the day, I'm grateful that Speaker McCarthy's made it clear that if there is to be an impeachment inquiry, he would submit that to a vote on the floor of the Congress. I don't think we ever want to see an impeachment initiated the way Nancy Pelosi started an impeachment unilaterally over a phone call by the President of the United States. I think the initiation of an impeachment inquiry, which will examine the facts and determine whether impeachment is appropriate, ought to be submitted to the House of Representatives, and we ought to let the Congress work its will. And again, I fully support the efforts in the Congress to give the American people the facts concerning the ethical cloud that's hanging over the Biden administration and the Biden family.
Let's do one more.
Do you fault the Biden administration for Kim Jong-un meeting with President Putin? I think he's traveling today to Russia to potentially negotiate an arms deal.
Well, look, Vladimir Putin is a menace, and I'm not surprised to see him making plans for a summit with Kim Jong-un. And the truth is that we have a vacuum of leadership on the world stage today. That disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan not only dishonored the service and sacrifice of men and women that defended this country there over the last 20 years, but it also really emboldened Russia and the enemies of freedom around the world. And now as we continue to see China and Russia and Iran and North Korea continue to build this axis, now more than ever, we need strong American leadership on the world stage. I'll provide that if I'm President of the United States. And let me say very emphatically today, I think the payment of $6 billion to the mullahs in Iran by the Biden administration is a disgrace, and it endangers Americans around the world. I mean, we should never pay ransom for the release of Americans from any regime, let alone the leading state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And so I want to denounce the decision by the Biden administration to pay $6 billion in ransom in exchange for the release of Americans. I welcome the release of American citizens from any country in the world, but when we pay ransom payments to terrorist regimes like Iran, we only encourage them and other similar terrorist regimes and those that sponsor terrorism to threaten the lives and the freedom of Americans around the world. So when I'm President of the United States, I promise you that we will stand firm. We'll always work to bring Americans home, but we'll never pay ransom for Americans, ever.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you, Vice President.